Hey team, loving all the interaction that we had in our first episode about the task of the team, and we're back for our second video, and this time around I want to be talking about how teams have two aspects that we need to be conscious of, and that are the task, which we have kind of talked about already, and the relational side of teams, task and relationship. If team is all about task and there's no relationship, people won't be drawn to give their best, but rather only what is necessary. Team members will do what they need to and not anymore. On the other hand, if teams are all about relationship, then there's no task focus and people will possibly enjoy being around because of all the social aspects of the team. But you will also probably lose good people, great people, people who have joined because they want to get things done. Such people will move on because they believe that being part of this team is just wasting their time. And so we need to cultivate both the task and the relational sides of our teams. A quick note here, in January, we spoke about the task of the team, and that is talking about the overall task of the team, the big why of what this team has been set up to do. Under that big task, there's a whole bunch of little tasks. And what some of the coordinators were doing, some of what you were doing was that you were listing down the different tasks of the team, but it's good to differentiate between the tasks that need to happen. For example, on a Sunday, the host teams need to be putting out chairs, tech team needs to be setting up the TVs, the sound equipment, band needs to be practicing and all of that, which are all really important. But when you can summarize that under one big task, that is something that helps to communicate, especially when you're trying to help new people be a part of the team and to induct them and to get them thinking about the why. If we don't do that, sometimes the specific tasks can become the most important thing rather than to see the big picture of the team and ultimately the big picture of the church. And that's why we need both the big task as well as the little tasks that we all need to do. And so what we need to be thinking about when it comes to leading teams with both relationship as well as task is this word that is called reflexivity, which basically just means the ability to examine one's own feelings, reactions, motives, and how these influence what we do in a situation. So putting it in a team setting, we need to have both task reflexivity as well as relational, social reflexivity. This means that the team from time to time has this ability to think about how are we getting these tasks done. That's the task reflexivity. So for example, one way that you could increase or you could have task reflexivity is to do a quick feedback session after a Sunday morning. You could gather the team around and say, hey, what do we do well? You could ask as well, what can we improve in? We try to do this, although this is a little bit difficult because we've got people from all sorts of different teams and it's just a little bit of a quick debrief for the whole church, but we run through stats, we run through a few key things, and then we ask people about highlights as well as opportunities on a Sunday morning. That is a way of doing task reflexivity. It probably isn't perfect. It's probably much better to do it in separate teams, but that's where it gets a little bit difficult. But you get the idea of task reflexivity. If you have a really high-performing team, you might be doing things like full-on staff reviews, for example, in your workplaces. That is to bring about this task reflexivity. How are we doing what we are meant to be doing? Are we doing them well? Can we be doing them better? That is a really important part of leading teams, because without task reflexivity, people can get this sense that the task is not that important, or they might be doing their own thing without really knowing whether it is contributing to this big picture or not. So task reflexivity is really, really important. It helps people to be creative, innovative as well, and to be able to contribute to where the team is going. The relational reflexivity is also really important. And this is something that I'm having to learn because I tend to be thinking a lot about tasks, about getting things done. I tend to have a checklist in my mind about everything that is taking place and whether we are doing them well or not. But relational reflexivity is really important because it helps team members to know that they are part of a community, that they can trust one another. In fact, that is one of the key things that research is showing, that trust is actually the basis of how teams can go on to be effective and healthy. Because when there is trust, people can work together, they can get to know each other, and they build this cohesion, which then allows people to bring their best together, and this team then begins to build. And so we need to build in relational reflexivity into our teams. At Lift, we refer to our core value where your name matters, and we want to see this in our teams as well. And so how you do relational reflexivity could be in things like how you actually do conflict resolution. In every team, there will be at times conflict. There should be conflict. Why should there be conflict? Is because you bring different people together. The moment you have more than one person working on a task, you bring two people together, you will have conflict at some point in time because of different perspectives and all sorts of different things. Anyway, how you approach conflict, especially as the coordinators, especially as the leaders of teams, how you allow conflict to take place, how the words that are used, the tone that is used, or whether even you avoid conflict, then sets a norm for the rest of the team as to how conflict takes place. That is a relational reflexivity. And so maybe there are times to help people to connect and to communicate with one another. There can be times like, there might be moments where you say something like, we say it like this, or we don't talk like this. Give them boundaries as to how people talk, how people relate. That is a relational reflexivity. I find that quite often, I do tend to neglect this, but relational reflexivity is built really well just by having people relax and getting together. We did speak about this at our coordinators gathering, but having this meal just allows people to relax and to relate, and that is a form of relational reflexivity. And so I've attached in this email a little chart with 4 quadrants, 4 boxes, and it talks about this relational and task orientation. When a team has low task orientation and a low relational orientation or reflexivity, the team is dysfunctional. People don't like each other, they don't know how to relate to each other, and they don't know what they're doing. However, if you have high task orientation but low relational orientation, you have this efficiency, but it's very cold. It doesn't invite people in. Whereas when you have high relationship, low task, you have a cozy team where everyone loves being around each other, but nothing gets done. We want fully functional teams with high task and high relationship orientations. And so we need to build this into our teams. So questions I'm going to be leaving with you is, how is your team going on both task reflexivity and relational reflexivity? What kind of ideas could you, or are you already putting in place, that you've already done perhaps, to practice task and relational reflexivity? You will probably find that you are more natural on one of these than the other. And you probably do quite well on one of these compared to the other. And that's fantastic. That gives you your natural strength. And what you might need to be wanting to do is to spend some time to think about the other arm. How can you build this other side? And that's something that Beck and I have been very deliberate about. I've been very deliberate about over the last 8-9 months. I've been thinking about it. I'm like, I do tasks so well. How we do in relationship? And that's why we started to do lots of meals and trying to get around people, just trying to love people, get to know them, and to build this relational reflexivity as well. I'm not perfect at it, definitely still growing at this, but it was really helpful for me to realize that teams have both a task as well as a relational side to it. Well, comment, send a reply to all so that we can continue this conversation. Thanks for tuning in.